If you could pick any superpower, what would it be? Invisibility? The power to fly? Super strength? These powers would certainly make your life easier, but Steinbeck suggests that there is something even better: the power of friendship. That might sound cheesy, but he sets up a compelling argument. He gives us a case study in his two main characters, George Milton and Lennie Small. This dynamic duo couldn't be more different. The first man was small and quick, dark of face, with restless eyes and sharp, strong features. Behind him walked his opposite, a huge man, shapeless of face, with large, pale eyes, with wide, sloping shoulders. Their visual juxtaposition, which is where two things are placed side by side, creates an interesting contrast or strong difference between these characters. They don't seem to have much in common. As strange as this combination might be, what's even stranger is that they're actually best buds. Is that because opposites attract, or have difficult circumstances heightened their need for companionship? Steinbeck plonks this unlikely friendship in the midst of a difficult life as itinerant ranch workers in California. These workers were usually travelling single men, floating from one job to another. George and Lennie are lucky to have each other. The smaller man, George, helpfully reminds Lennie that guys like us that work on ranches are the loneliest guys in the world. They got no family. They don't belong no place. The hyperbole, or exaggeration, of them being the loneliest guys in the world emphasises how precious their friendship is. It fortifies them against the misery of isolation that eats away at a person's soul. To George, their greatest superpower is their dedication to one another. Practically no one living their kind of life has friends. He tells Lennie, "With us, it ain't like that. We got a future. We got somebody to talk to that gives a damn about us." The anaphora, where the phrases repeatedly start with "we got," contrasts their situation with those around them. What's more, it is because they have each other that they have a future. George and Lennie have the luxury of dreaming about a better life. It becomes immediately obvious why Lennie needs George. Having an intellectual disability, Lennie relies heavily on George for guidance and protection. What's not so clear is why George seems to need Lennie. Why tie yourself to a guy who constantly gets you in trouble? To George, the benefit of companionship far outweighs the trouble Lennie brings. Besides, helping Lennie seems to give George a sense of purpose in life. When Lennie talks about leaving, George tells Lennie, "I want you to stay with me, Lennie. You stay with me." He uses monosyllabic sentences, or sentences with single-syllable words, to tell Lennie something important. He needs Lennie to be with him. George ultimately feels a sense of belonging to Lennie. It's too hard to tough it out on your own. Steinbeck depicts such a unique friendship that the other men on the ranch frequently ask about it. Their boss is very suspicious at first. He thinks that such a friendship can't exist, so surely George must be exploiting him. "You taken his pay away from him? I never seen one guy take so much trouble for another guy." Steinbeck criticises the way capitalist agendas have eroded basic human community. The boss's tone, or emotion, of suspicion emphasises the uncharacteristic care a tough guy like George seems to extend to Lennie. Steinbeck then presents to us a whole ranch full of lonely men, and they seem so miserable. We meet Candy, the elderly swamper, which is someone who performs maintenance tasks around the ranch. He lost his hand in an accident, and his disability leaves him vulnerable to discrimination and isolation. His one saving grace is his faithful old dog, a universal symbol of loyalty and friendship. Remember, a symbol is something that represents a bigger idea. But Carlson shoots the dog because he's old, toothless, and stinky, ignoring the fact that he's Candy's best and only friend. Candy confides to George, "You seen what they done to my dog tonight? They says he wasn't no good to himself nor nobody else. When they can me here, I wish somebody'd shoot me." Candy's hopeless tone illustrates his sense of despair. He sees no purpose in life, and the loss of his dog drains him of his will to live. Another striking image of loneliness is Crooks. He's the most resilient and stable employee at the ranch, although he's deeply impacted by his loneliness. He is the only black man on the ranch, and his isolation is the result of racial discrimination. In his dialogue or conversation with Lennie, Crooks says, "A guy goes nuts if he ain't got nobody. Don't make no difference who the guy is, long's he's with you. I tell ya, a guy gets too lonely and he gets sick." The imagery or words that create a mental picture of sickness and disease refers to mental illnesses like depression. Isolation and loneliness can mess with a person on the inside, which can be more debilitating than a physical injury. What's more, the benefits of friendship go beyond protecting you from a crushed soul. We see it empowers these men to survive by giving them a reason to hope. For George and Lennie, that hope is to one day own their own piece of land. It's the American dream. Lennie repeats it over and over to live off of the fat of the land. This refrain is stacked with biblical allusion, or a reference to the Old Testament Bible about an earthly paradise, a promised land flowing with milk and honey. But everything falls apart when tragedy strikes. Unaware of his own strength and overtaken by panic, Lennie makes the critical mistake of killing Curly's wife. When Candy finds the body, he knows straight away that the dream is over. Now Candy spoke his greatest fear. "You and me can get that little place, can't we, George? You and me can go and live nice, can't we, George? Can't we?" The repetition in Candy's frantic questions, where he asks, "Can't we?" more than once, shows his panic and grief over the death of their shared dream. If there's no Lennie, there's no dream for George. The dream will die with one of them because it only exists in both of them. But that isn't the only loss George must suffer. He watches as the men set out to murder Lennie themselves. George must make a difficult choice. Should he commit Lennie to a mental institution forever, or let these men hurt him? Or perhaps there's another way. George decides that the greatest kindness is to kill Lennie. So he ensures that Lennie's last moments are happy, surrounded by the beautiful scenery of the Salinas Valley and dreaming about his precious rabbits. The rabbits are a motif or recurring symbol of their shared hope and Lennie's intrinsic innocence. He tells Lennie, "Look down there across the river, like you can almost see the place." Of course, Lennie can't actually see the place, but the place will always be an entrancing symbol of hope, which is the most important gift George can give to Lennie in his last moments. George goes on to promise him that everybody gonna be nice to you. Ain't gonna be no more trouble. Nobody gonna hurt nobody nor steal from 'em. Steinbeck uses another biblical allusion here to depict paradise as a place with no more death or mourning or crying or pain, specifically for Lennie. We are starting to see George farewell Lennie in his own subtle way. The shock of the shot is loud and visceral. He pulled the trigger. The crash of the shot rolled up the hills and rolled down again. Lennie jarred. The auditory imagery helps us imagine a terrible sound. It's the reverberating shock of Lennie's death. The jarring action of Lennie's body not only depicts the physical violence to Lennie, but also to George's poor heart. We feel his crashing sense of sorrow. George's decision to kill Lennie is extreme, and Steinbeck isn't saying that manslaughter is the answer. But it does show us the complexity of friendship. Sometimes difficult decisions must be made for the well-being of the other person, even at significant personal cost. This was not the ending we were hoping for, but it is bittersweet. Lennie is finally free and safe from the cruel world he lived in. And even though George is left alone, we know he's smart and capable enough to fend for himself. What would you have done in George's place? Friendship is a superpower, especially in a world filled with lonely people. And the thing with superpowers is they often make you a superhero. Lennie and George didn't have much between them, but they ultimately had what mattered: each other. We hope you enjoyed this school